Will Dylan Raiola be more of a runner in 2025? That and more in a mailbag coming up.
You are Locked On Nebraska, your daily Nebraska Cornhuskers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, good morning, happy Friday, and thanks for making Locked On Nebraska your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action. Right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com to get started.
Okay, welcome. It is Friday, the first Friday of 2025. I'm Mitch Sherman from The Athletic. Connor Haber, 1620 The Zone in Omaha, is with me. We are ready to do a mailbag show, so hope everybody is doing well. Thanks for all your questions. Did you know it was Friday? It's been one of those weeks where I haven't actually been sure of the day. Thursday, yesterday, the day after New Year's, it did not feel like a Thursday.
Yeah, like Thursday definitely felt like Monday, coming off of, Wednesday, which felt like Saturday. It was odd. But you know what's funny? You always know when Friday is. Friday is like the North Star. It's like
That's true.
It's Friday, and I'm gonna make it feel like Friday, even though it doesn't feel like Friday.
Yeah,
so yes.
That's legit. Yeah, it's gonna feel like a Friday. So what do we have? We had college football on Thursday. The college football playoff semifinals are set. We got some questions about that coming up in the mailbag. We'll get to that. We're going to start with Nebraska's quarterback. This is a question from Vince in Napa via the email. Thank you, Vince, for the question. He says, even though Nebraska is not employing designed quarterback runs with Dylan Raiola, do you envision a scenario in which he is encouraged to use his mobility more often? While he's not Taylor Martinez, he certainly is not, he has enough functional mobility to pick up first downs with his legs if receivers are not open. Your thoughts?
I think there will be a difference into how he approaches running from 2000. I mean, especially from the beginning of 2024 to the beginning of 2025. I mean, he looked at times in the first half of this past year, 2024, that he had been told to never run under any circumstances, and throw the football away. And if you do find yourself in a position where, you have to grab a yard or two, like go down, don't hurt yourself, protect the football, all that stuff. Like he played with a lot of timidness, I think, at various points throughout this season. So I think as you look ahead to next year, and one of the things that you saw in the bowl game was, I mean, like his ability, yes, to run, but more so the mentality of, hey, I want the ball and I'm going to pull it and I can go make a play, and I could be like, I could be smart enough to get down, in time for me to not get hurt. And so I don't know if there's like design stuff that's going to be in there, but I think you'll see him utilize it a little bit more just because his mentality will have changed a little bit.
I think he has solid instincts on when to run, but he is not experienced in how to do it. So part of the reason that you don't see true freshmen play often in college football at the quarterback position, and this year, Dylan was a unicorn in going out there and starting 13 games. Look at the past few years since the transfer portal has become the primary method through which championship caliber teams get quarterbacks. The number of true freshmen who play in the sport and start for an entire season or even a big chunk of the season is way, way down. Not that it was high to begin with, but it's down. You had DJ Lagway at Florida and you had Dylan Raiola at Nebraska this year who did it. And then there were very few others. Those were the two notable primary guys. And the reason for that is because they need the experience. Even great quarterbacks come in and have redshirted or have played very small roles, and then they go on to stardom. So you really saw Dylan learning everything about college football on the run. Now, he had a great education, and the reason that he was able to do this is because he had a great education on how to play the quarterback position, on the throwing mechanics part of it, on the training, the stuff that you don't see on the field. Like, he was ahead of the curve on all of that. But I can tell you what he hasn't trained at the level that's needed to succeed in college football is the running aspect of it, and especially like how to slide and when to get down. It's not something that he's done. It's not something that he's worked with the NFL pedigree quarterbacks who have been in his life on how to do. So all of that, like, he's just your regular true freshman out there, very much learning on the run, doesn't have an advantage over other quarterbacks at all. And you saw that when he was asked to slide. Yeah. That's why on the last drive against Boston College, like, he had a couple plays that could have been more smooth when he was asked to slide. So he goes into this offseason and he can work on that stuff, and he can work with his coaches and his trainers, and he can get better at that. I think you'll see him get better at that. As far as knowing when to do it, like when to take off with the ball, when he's allowed, when they give him the option and say, it's okay for you to run if your reads aren't there, if things aren't open, you don't have to throw it away if there's room for you to run. And I think he had that green light in the second half of the season after with the Ohio State game. He has the instincts to do it and the athleticism to do it.
Just be an option, right? Make yourself an option. It's obviously unnatural to him, so he's got to get a little bit better at it, but make yourself an option. And I think he did that a little better as the year went on.
Yeah. Okay. Hope that answered your question, Vince. From Mike on email, he says, I enjoy listening to you guys. Been listening to this pod for the last few months. Thank you. As well as hearing Connor on 1620. Here's my question. How long will it take to do away with the first round bye in the CFP and expand to at least 16 teams? After Georgia loses Thursday, he was guessing. He sent this in. Good guess. It happened. All 4 of the teams that received byes will have lost. That's not going to be a spot to want, and it was pretty predictable since the longer layoff seems to have left teams lethargic at the start.
Yeah. They're gonna go back in, and there will have a meeting of the minds, and they'll have to get full, everybody to agree that you can go in and change the bylaws of this thing. But they will. They'll, because that's what we do. We look at how one thing played out one time, and then we decide we don't like it, and we change it. And then we'll have another sort of swing of an overreaction next year, and that's how the sport kind of is right now. So, I don't know what the right way. That's something that I kind of want to explore a little bit. I don't know what the right solution to either seeding the playoff or the right number of playoff teams. Frankly, I think 12 is too many, but we're not going back.
I would love to see 8. I wish they would have gone from 4 to 8 instead of just jumping to 12. But
I don't know. I mean, I don't know what the right answer is. I don't know if there is a right answer. Like it's sort of moved forever. But to answer the question of like, is something going to happen or how long will it take? It won't take very long. They're gonna change some things, I think, this offseason.
Yeah, I think there'll be a different format in 2025. It'll be 12 teams, but I think you'll have a different way of determining the byes. The fact that we're going to the semifinals and there are no conference champions alive is a little alarming. And the way that the Georgia and Oregon and then you have Arizona State and Boise, who were the other 2 teams that received the byes. The way that they played in the playoff and then what SMU, Clemson was the ACC champ, 0 for 5 on conference champs. That for sure is concerning. I think it's kind of an anomaly, but at the same time, it's good that it happened the first year because it shines a light on what's a real problem. Like, give the 4 best teams the byes. That's kind of where I think you should start. Is to give the 4 best teams the byes. Like, your reward for winning a conference championship should be having a conference championship. You don't need to get a bye just because you won a conference championship. And
so
the 4 best teams should get the
we
byes.
Want to. So it's either one way or the other, right? We either completely disincentivize winning a conference championship, or we make it more important. Give them more of an advantage. And I haven't seen anybody suggest that. So I don't know. I kind of hate to see that happen, but I guess that's the way. That's the way we seem to be headed.
Yeah, it's going to change. I think that's the thing that we know. So Shane, with a follow-up to this on YouTube, asks if Paul Finebaum and ESPN are losing their minds over this college football playoff. Of course, the SEC has had a rough, not just a rough playoff, but a rough bowl season. Ole Miss did get the win last night against Duke, but that doesn't really save face all that much. Georgia didn't look like Georgia. Dropping passes, mistakes on special teams. How about Notre Dame and those special teams, by the way? So the Notre Dame, which is not an ESPN property, and the Big Ten, which is not an ESPN property, are really winning the playoff to this point so far. So I looked, when I put this question into our outline, I looked to see if Finebaum, if Paul had been tweeting through the evening last night, and not a lot coming from him. I'm sure they're going to lick their wounds, and the SEC is going to be okay. That's the thing. And ESPN's going to be just fine. Like ESPN's going to get great ratings on Ohio State, Notre Dame, Texas, and Penn State in the semis. They'll be fine.
So he had like a come to the other day where he, after Alabama lost to Michigan, he was like, I'm waving the white flag. Like, I got to stop doing this thing with Alabama. Like he didn't say outwardly, like, you guys were right, because he would never say that, but he hopped off the Alabama bandwagon, at least for the short term. So that's as close to an apology as you're going to get.
All right. Good job.
Nice
Good
job
for you,
by
Paul.
him. Yep.
All right, when we come back, we're going to talk Nebraska basketball. We promised we would do it. Huskers have a huge game coming up tomorrow at Pinnacle Bank Arena. We got some questions that we're going to answer. That's after this.
But first, I'd like to tell you about the FanDuel Sportsbook. The NFL playoffs are almost here, and it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. They have so many ways for you to pick up a W on the FanDuel Sportsbook. Anytime touchdown scores, first touchdown scores. How about parlaying first touchdown scores for an even bigger payout? It is, that's not the only way. There's the spreads, there's the over-unders, there's the playoff props, who goes how far, who wins the Super Bowl, and all of those things. It's all available for you on the FanDuel Sportsbook. So head to FanDuel.com and join today. FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, welcome back. Connor Happer, Mitch Sherman with you here on the Locked On Nebraska podcast, finishing out the week. Nebraska basketball tomorrow with a gigantic home game against UCLA, a team. Did I read this right in the notes? They haven't beaten UCLA since the 70s or something like that. Yeah. So
it's probably right. I mean, UCLA was pretty good in the 70s. I saw a note. This was not from the esteemed Seamus McKnight, Nebraska's basketball SID. I saw this floating around on Twitter. I should probably double check this before I say it on the pod, but I'm just going to say it anyway. Nebraska last played UCLA in Lincoln in 1955. Is that possible?
Was from Seamus. That was a Seamus note. Nice job, Seamus.
Okay, Seamus got us that one, but I saw it. Somebody else was passing it off as their own. Would have been a Jerry Bush coached team against John Wooden. That's amazing. So Jerry Bush, Fred Hoiberg's grandfather, beat John Wooden before John Wooden was really John Wooden. So fantastic note right there.
Yeah, that's good Seamus stuff right there. I'm trying to look at the series history in basketball between these two schools, and first of all, there's not much of it, but it's a big game on Saturday afternoon in Lincoln. By the way, Big Fox as well. You got the great
Brando.
You got the great Timmy B and Nick Baugh on the call.
That's fantastic.
It's going to be beautiful. So it's a big day, big showcase for Nebraska basketball. We have a couple questions about the Huskers. From Just Fletch on Twitter, can Nebraska find an elusive Big Ten road win? So he's skipping ahead of this one on on Saturday, and he wants to talk about road games.
Well, I don't know. I'm not sure about this question. Nebraska on the road has been all right of late. Look, Nebraska won at Creighton this year. Nebraska won at Hawaii this year, which is not an easy thing to do. You go back to the end of last season, Nebraska had road wins in February at Michigan and at Indiana. So it was a hurdle that Nebraska did not clear for a long time as a program, but the Huskers have done that a few times now. And at home, as we know, Nebraska's is great, going for a 20th consecutive home win, which would tie a school record if Nebraska gets that against the Bruins tomorrow. And I think it would be 12 in the Big Ten, 12 consecutive Big Ten wins that Nebraska is aiming for. I don't think, honestly, with the leadership that Nebraska has from Brice Williams and Juwan Gary, and we'll get to part of that combo in the next question, I don't think that winning on the road is something that is a big block for this team. Now, they're not going to win every game on the road. They're you would love to like go 500, and Nebraska played horribly in its one road game in the Big Ten so far this year at Michigan State. But Iowa next week on the road, I would look for Nebraska to play all right.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, I don't know. We sort of have to make this adjustment from football to basketball often. Like, if you're in a high major conference, it's just really, really hard to win road games, period. Because everybody's good and everybody needs their home wins. And like, think about the pressure on Nebraska to win all of their home games this year, to win enough games to get into the NCAA tournament. Like, it's immense. You have to take care of business at home when you have opportunities. And especially if you get big games at home, which Nebraska has won this Saturday. So going on the road is really hard. And I agree with you, Mitch. Like, I don't think there's just like a mental block there or anything. I just think it's hard. So you have to win a couple, and see where the chips fall at the end of the season, and then take care of business in all your home games.
To his point, Nebraska does. I mean, if it's on your mind, it's understandable, because after UCLA, Nebraska's on the road Tuesday at Iowa, and then next Sunday at Purdue. So coming up with some challenges for sure.
This road slate is hard. I mean, like, Iowa, Purdue, Maryland, Wisconsin, Oregon, and then finally like a little bit of an easier one with Washington. But Washington beat Maryland last night at home.
That's all in the next month. In the next month and 2 days. Yeah, that doesn't even get to. It eases up a bit in February with Northwestern, Penn State, and then Ohio State on the road to finish before the Big Ten tournament.
So just keep in mind, it's really, really difficult. Here's Richard on Twitter. Speaking of Nebraska basketball, Richard says, and I agree, Brice Williams is on a heater right now. In order to continue maximizing his scoring potential, is he better at the point or on the wing?
Well, he's 6'7". So, and you have Raleigh Worcester.
Yeah, they got to play guard.
So, I mean, I understand. And Hoiberg likes he'll talk about like the positionless offense. So you're going to see Brice bring the ball up the court, even at times when Raleigh is out there. But when they get settled into their offense, he's not the point guard. Like, he's playing the wing.
That doesn't matter. They're going to have no problem getting the ball in his hand. That's the story, right? Because he's a little limited in terms of his like athleticism. But, he's creative enough to where he can get to the rim, and he's been an incredible 3-point shooter this year. He's shooting 43% from three. And that's all like,
wow.
Some of that is off the dribble. Some of it is off the catch and off the screen. Like, he's kind of doing it at all three levels right now. So I wouldn't really, I don't want to box him in, right? Like you said, you're kind of going with the positionless basketball thing, even though Raleigh Worcester is your point guard, and then Brice Williams is on the wing. You got your big guys and stuff like that.
Yeah,
like
Braxton Mia, it's not positionless when it comes to Braxton Mia. He has a position.
right. But so they have certain molds, but you go off of what you're like. That's what positionless means. You go off of what each guy's skill set is. And Brice has a really diverse skill set. He can do a lot of different things. So yeah, you're going to see him in a lot of different places on the basketball court. But as long as he keeps up this efficiency, he's he's going to be one of the most impactful players in the conference this year.
Yeah, he can play the 1, 2, and the 3. So that's what you're going to see from him.
Yep. Could we get one or two
let's
more?
do these. Let's do these next two quickly. I think these don't require long answers, and then we'll get back into some heavy duty football talk in the third segment.
Yeah, this one isn't even a question, but I appreciate it being here. Here's Ken on the email. I lived in Miami, and I saw both the 94 and 95 Orange Bowls after Nebraska beat Miami. I bought the poster. The same. It looks like the same poster, right, Mitch? That you got. You picked up off the street.
Yeah, he sent an email. He sent an email in with his, and his was he framed it and put it in his office, and it inspired me. Ken inspired me. I got a frame. After 30 years, I'm going to put mine in a frame. I don't know. I just have this bin. That I think I mentioned this on the show when I showed the poster on New Year's Day. It was the 30-year anniversary of the 95 Orange Bowl, and Tom Osborne's first championship. And I just have this bin of Nebraska stuff like that I picked up at what I thought were meaningful games at the time. You know, if it's a national championship game, it's fairly obvious that it's meaningful. If it's Scott Frost's first home game, you think it maybe is at the time, and then it turns out to be
memorable,
not so much.
At the very least. Yeah,
memorable. I do have the game program from the Akron game that got rained out. I don't know if that's worth more than like $1, but maybe someday I'll try to hawk that. But yeah. I think I don't remember buying it, but I think I just bought it for like $2 or something outside of the Orange Bowl as I left. So I was young, a young college student, and I sat in the stands for that game. I think I covered like the Charlie McBride day after the game press conference, which was like my responsibility for the Daily Nebraskan on that trip to the 95 Orange Bowl. So I sat in the stands like with my dad and with a couple of friends. So we left right after the game. It wasn't like I was working for hours and walk into the parking lot or wherever we parked, where we're worried about our car getting stolen from. Just grab that thing on the way out. It was great, and it's still alive.
Ken also mentions the old Orange Bowl Stadium, which that was it's if you look at some of those late 90s, early 2000s bowl games, and then how different it looks right now, it's kind of crazy to think about. So thanks for that email, Ken. And then Michael. Could you reflect? Thanks for this, question, by the way, Michael. Could you reflect on your experience doing this show for the past year? Seinfeld-inspired content is definitely a plus. Do you plan to change anything in year 2 of the Locked On Nebraska podcast?
I don't know. I'm kind of just thinking about it like day to day. We should probably think more like in terms of long-term thoughts for the show and what we want to do, especially since we're coming into this off-season period. We started the show in April last year, so we haven't really been through a January, February, March to this point. We're just kind of winging it. And thank you, Michael, for enjoying it and for watching it. Maybe Connor, do you have any ideas of what we would want to change coming into the last stretch of year 1?
Not really. Like you said, there's like it's such a compact space that there's always 2 or 3 things to talk about on a daily basis.
Content kind of comes to us, so we'll react as the things happen, and I'm sure things will continue to happen.
But it's been a lot of fun. It's been we haven't made it a full year yet, but we're going into our second calendar year, which is good, and it's been really cool to see how people have sort of grasped onto it. People come up to me in public who, they're not listeners of the radio show, or they're finally piecing it together. That I'm in all these different places. Like I really like the podcast with Mitch. I'm like, wow, okay, all right, this is good.
Yeah, I hear that often. I heard it in New York from a couple of people, and sometimes in the airport. So that's great to hear. Thanks for all the support of getting us through 2024, and we'll have a fun 2025, I'm sure. Another question from Michael that's coming up after the break. This one is about Marcus Satterfield, so stay with us, and we'll get to that. All right, I want to tell you about Rocket Money, and the question that I have is this: do you have any subscriptions that you've forgotten about or that you might be overpaying for? If so, Rocket Money makes it easy to track all of them down. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps you find and cancel unwanted subscriptions. It helps you monitor your spending. It helps you lower your bills so you can grow your savings. All sounds good. Rocket Money brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, spending habits, even the goals you want to hit this year in 2025. It has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $501 million in canceled subscriptions. That's up to $740 a year for each member if you use all of the app's premium features. So cancel your unwanted subscriptions today. Reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/locked-on. That's rocketmoney.com/locked-on. Okay, we're back for final segment on this Friday and for this first partial week of January in 2025. We go back to Michael, who had the last question about our show. He asks in this one, should Nebraska retain Marcus Satterfield? It doesn't seem like a great situation. A tight ends coach doesn't win you a lot of football games, but if he's a distraction, he could lose them for you. I would prefer a clean break. What do you think?
Yeah, it doesn't bother me much that he's the tight ends coach. With that being said, I think he's probably looking around and can kind of see the writing on the wall. And that at that point, it's just a matter of like, all right, is there another place where I can be the offensive coordinator? It depends. It kind of depends on what he wants too, right? So I don't feel like he's a distraction. I'm not in that room every day. And I feel like he's the kind of guy who gets his assignment and goes, you know what I mean? Like, I don't feel like he's going to be sitting around moping that he's not the offensive coordinator. So I don't feel like he's a distraction. And I don't know that Nebraska necessarily needs a clean break, but I understand why people would say that.
Yeah, I don't think it's a big issue or really any kind of an issue to have him on staff. If it was a different personality and
Right.
you know, you sensed, and if Holgorsen had Dana Holgorsen had a different personality too. Like, I don't think Dana really gives a whatever if there's somebody out there who is part of this offensive staff who used to call the plays. Like, Dana is not going to feel awkward about that at all. Like, he's very confident and comfortable in his own skin. Like, he's been in the game long enough that it's like you see coaches in all kinds of different roles. Like, sometimes a coach is your supervisor, your boss, ahead of you in the pecking order, and then 2 years later you're ahead of them. Like, it just happens in this business.
Yep.
And it's not like these two have worked together in the past, but I don't think it's an issue for Dana. And if it's not an issue for Dana, then it's probably not an issue for Matt Rule. What is an issue is his $1.4 million salary. I don't know. I don't know how that is going to work for 2025, because it's not a great spot to pay your tight ends coach $1.4 million, but that's his contract. And if he had been fired in November, which was an option, he could have just walked away and Nebraska would have fired him and they would have owed him that money. It would seem that if he's going to work for you, that at the very least you can do is continue to honor his contract. So I don't know exactly how that's going to happen. Maybe it's not a problem. Maybe it's just like, this is what you got to do, and you can work for us or you can not work for us, but
Right.
you sign this contract and Nebraska's going to honor it. I don't know. I'm kind of more inclined to kind of keep an eye on like what happens there. Like, are they going to restructure this thing and extend him another year because they like him as the tight ends coach, or you know, you just play this year out and say, okay, after 2025, it's probably going to be time to move on.
I think there's always probably ways around the money piece of it. It's just, I think they're both, Rule and Saterfield are like close enough to where they'll work something out and it'll be beneficial for everybody, I think.
Yeah. Okay, a couple questions to finish about the topics that we were discussing on Thursday's show. If you haven't heard it, go check it out. We talked about Nebraska's new wide receivers out of the portal. The last one being Hardly Gilmore, the second transfer to come in from Kentucky with new wide receivers coach Dakeil Shorts. Nebraska also signed Dane Key, made that official. The announcement just on Thursday. He went up on the Husker Twitter account and is on the roster. So Key's got 1 year. Gilmore has 3 years to play. So we talked about how Nebraska is kind of moving away, at least at the wide receiver spot, from this developmental mindset and more into like players who are ready to go when they get on campus. We've seen 4 Nebraska players, all in-state players who have left the program since the season ended, and then 3 who have come in from the portal. So 10X Shooters on YouTube asks us the question about whether the developmental mindset if the developmental mindset has been thrown on the back burner, does that mean if Nebraska gets to 10 wins next year, if Nebraska doesn't get to 10 wins next year, that Rule will be on the hot seat?
Well, I mean, I think you could follow. I don't know if it's that black and white, but I do think you could follow that line a little bit and say, I mean, first of all, it's year 3, right? It's time to freaking win. So there's that piece of it. And yeah, there's currently more. I think there's definitely more urgency to do that because it is the 3rd year, and I think there's been an evaluation on what's gone right and what's gone wrong over the first 2 years. So like, I think they're holding themselves to that expectation. You don't want to sit around if they win 6 games next year with this group of wide receivers and be like, well, just wait till next year and get better players and develop more or get better players or pay more NIL. Like, nobody wants to do that. So yeah, I think there's an increased pressure this year. And I think Rule would admit that to you. And to himself and to everybody. So I don't know if it's that black and white, like, hey, if you don't get to 10, then you're fired or whatever. But it's certainly taken a step up in urgency over the last several months.
Yeah, the way the roster is going to be structured, and this is in part just like dictated by the 105. There is more urgency. There is more of a focus on having players who are ready to go, and less on development, which is, kind of sad for Nebraska because that's the way that Nebraska has done things and bringing players along through the pipeline. But this is college football today. And for programs like Nebraska or Iowa that have traditionally developed players, they're going to have to find more of a balance. And it does create more urgency. You see teams that win in year 1 and 2 under new coaches. So Nebraska went from 5 wins in year 1 to 7 wins in year 2. That's adequate. It's an adequate jump. Like, take yourself out of all of the drama that you saw this year and the close games that maybe didn't need to be close or the ones that were lost, and say, hey, they went from 5 to 7 from year 1 to year 2. Okay, in year 3, you got to jump again. So does that mean 8 or 9 wins? Yeah, that's what improvement would be in year 3. I don't think there's like a 10-win bar that you've got to hit or he's in trouble. No, that's maybe extreme, but you got to show improvement.
Yeah, you got to be really competitive.
If you don't, then the pressure ramps up.
Exactly. No doubt about it. You got to be super competitive this year.
Okay. Final question is along these same lines too, because in this discussion about the wide receivers, I just wondered aloud, like, what is the place? What is the spot for the players who are still in this program, in this kind of developmental mindset? And the question from International Matt on YouTube,
nice,
well-traveled. He says, Keelan Smith and Quinn Clark are both legacy players and the sons of former Huskers Neil Smith and Ken Clark. Yes, they are. If the Huskers do not keep them, what does that say to other former players? Well,
I think those guys are sticking around.
Yeah, right. If we made the suggestion that those guys are going somewhere, then that was unintended. You need more than 4 receivers. Nebraska has 4 receivers kind of at the top of things going into this season. The 3 who've come in from the portal in Ja'Cory Barney. And I said everybody else we'll see. It's kind of up in the air. Up in the air what their status is, how they're going to be used, how they're going to get on the field. Not necessarily up in the air as to whether they're going to stay in the program. I think Smith and Clark are for sure here for a while.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, both of those guys, I think, were mentioned as guys who sort of were making moves behind the scenes last year. And there's the one thing you have a pretty good idea, especially now after the season ended. If you're in the program, you have a pretty good idea of where you stand. They're pretty forthcoming about that stuff, I think. So if you're still here, you must feel like there's a pretty good opportunity for you to be a player at some point. And I think that's the case.
If Cortez Mills and Isaiah Mosey as true freshmen come in and immediately jump those two on the depth chart, then you have to wonder. Then you have to wonder, like, well, okay, what are they going to do to get on the field? Because they have to be progressing. So it goes for everybody. It doesn't the legacy part of it, the former players' sons, like that doesn't matter. And former players are going to support the program, or they're not going to support the program, and that's not really of consequence necessarily to Matt Rule. Like, they're not going to make decisions about playing time and development, focus on development, right, because someone is the son of a former Husker. It's great to have those guys in the program. You want them in the program. You want their dads. In the case of Neil Smith, Ken Clark, that passed away, late Ken Clark, great running back at Nebraska in the 1980s. You want those guys and their families to be supportive, of course, but that doesn't factor into how their sons are brought along.
Yeah, cross that bridge when you get there, I suppose. Okay, that is it for us. Thanks for the mailbag questions. Appreciate it. And enjoy your weekend, everybody. We'll talk to you on Monday. Appreciate this being your first listen. For your second listen, check out Locked On Big Ten. You can find that podcast on YouTube or wherever you get your pods.